the NRF, and she has very kindly offered to present to us today. Hi, Tracy. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
It's only a pleasure. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. Our delegates are possibly a little tired, so if they're not too animated, please excuse them. They've had marathon sessions this morning, but really we're at quite a key point in our stakeholders meeting. We just had the presentation from Linda, and I think one of the big issues that comes up is with research. How do we pay for the research? We want to do this research, but at the end of the day, there's an economics attached to it. So we're really looking forward to hearing what you can share with us. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Tracy. Thank you.
I'm going to stop sharing my screen if that's okay. And then I don't know, how do you want to manage the questions? Do you want people to ask questions as I go, or wait until the end?
We'll wait until the end, Tracy. Do your full presentation, and then you've got about 20 minutes for people to respond, and I'll do my best to man the chat section.
It's going to be more than enough time. Okay.
Pleasure. All right.
Alrighty. Okay, can you see my screen?
Not quite yet, Tracy. We'll just give it a moment.
Okay.
Okay, it's not coming through yet.
Oh, it's probably because I didn't ask to share my screen. How do I?
If you click the arrow that goes heavenwards, it's next to the leave button on your top right-hand corner.
Okay.
There we go. There we go.
Are we winning? Alrighty.
We are winning. We can see if you. Okay. There we go. Spot on.
Right.
Thanks, Tracy.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Sorry, is anybody saying something? Just a reminder to perhaps mute if you haven't yet done so. All right.
Okay, so my name is Tracy. I work at the National Research Foundation at the NRA business unit. I work in a division or a directorate that's called Knowledge Advancement and Support. And it's one of the three main granting arms of RESA. So we've also got the research chairs and the centers of excellence, and we've got human and institutional capacity development. So we do the established researchers, and then our CCE, the research chairs, and so we support the pipeline from the students all the way up to centers of excellence. But there are different directors and different directorates that operate within the NRF. So there's my email address. So if anybody maybe wants to ask a question, but you're too flat out from your morning session, then that's my email address. You're welcome to contact me anytime. Okay, so I wanted to give you guys a little bit of context about how things work at the NRF. As I said, we've got different instruments and different people do things differently. It depends on whether we've got contracts or, we have specific deliverables for some of our instruments. But there is an opportunity to develop funding instruments that are top down. So that would be happening if we have a contract. A lot of our money comes from the DSI in form of contracts, and they're quite specific in terms of the the strategic objectives of those particular contracts. We've got bottom-up investment areas where we identify, or the community identifies a vulnerable discipline or an area where they feel that the NRF should be looking at strengthening. For instance, statistics, we've been working with the statisticians for a long time now, building up capacity in universities, getting the students supported. So that's an example of a bottom-up instrument development. And then we've got a whole suite of bilateral or multilateral instrument development. So that would either be country to country. What's happening more and more is it's funding agency to funding agency. So an example of that would be the Belmont Forum, where all the partners of the Belmont Forum develop a particular instrument. They look at their priority areas, and then they invest in a call. And then you've got all these rules that say Belmont Forum multilateral. That means they must have at least one African partner other than South Africa, or there must be a social scientist involved or anything like that. And that is between the members of the Belmont Forum, or each different country delegate, or each different funding agency delegate, and that gets worked on together. So when we talk about top-down, as I said, we've got the government contracts. The vast majority of that comes from the Departments of Science and Innovation, but we've also got forestry and fisheries, and you know, we work a lot with DIRCO as well. And that contract money, as I said, it's very specific strategic objectives, and we have very little say in terms of how that contract is expensed. It's quite limiting. And then we've got what they call the parliamentary baseline, the grant baseline, and this we call core money. This is money that we get directly from government, from Parliament, to essentially do what the NRF is mandated to do. So there's an amended act which includes a lot of community engagement and science outreach and stuff like that. So our mandate has been expanded slightly, but essentially this is where the bottom up could come from. It says the NRF will decide either on its own or with its stakeholders what we're going to be funding and why and for how long. So, as I said, bottom-up instrument development. So I mentioned statistics, vulnerable disciplines, emerging disciplines. Sometimes there are areas that don't fit nicely into little tight boxes. Transdisciplinary science, for instance, that, you know, gets kicked out either by the social scientists or by the natural scientists, and nobody can agree. So that would be something that we would look at. Bottom up would also come from a higher education institution. So University of Pretoria was the institution that initiated the statistics initiative with us. Science councils, obviously, and these are all your strategic initiatives. This would not be a single research project. This would be a program. So it would be strategic. There might be infrastructure associated with it. It might be to assist the university in creating a flagship, for instance. So that's from the bottom up. So we spoke a little bit about the multinationals or the bilaterals. As I said, it's between the government departments, so that would be DIRCO. You've got your foreign partners, other the countries, because we've got government-to-government bilateral and multilateral agreements, so it would be at that level. NRF, we've got international partnerships. As I mentioned, the Belmont Forum, which looks very specifically at environmental sustainability. Individual researchers, research groups, research associations, societies, higher education institutions, and science councils. So these can all inform what would go into and what would be important for the NRF or for South Africa in these particular conversations. Oops. Okay, so these are the core funding opportunities. So this is where the NRF can direct its money at its will, pretty much. And this is just some of the examples of these. So we've got Tutuka, depending on whether you early career, postdoc. There's a rating track as well, competitive support for rated and unrated researchers. It's two separate instruments. We've got another developmental one that is specifically for Y-rated researchers. So if you want to, you've got a Y rating, you can either apply to competitive support for rated researchers or Y researchers, incentive funding, knowledge interchange and collaboration, which is travel, infrastructure, equipment, and then we've got bursaries and fellowships. So there's a wide suite of funding opportunities, and funding instruments that that you could have a look at that aren't theme specific. So accessing the NRF funding, the first thing that you need to do is you need to find out who the right person is, the designated authority at your research office. Most institutions have got a research office, and the people in those research offices are very clued up on how the systems work and how rigid the deadlines can be, because a lot of them are ex-NRF people. What you would do is you need to get onto this website, the NRF submissions, and you need to what's the word? You need to register. You need to get your CV on there, register, give you a password, and that's the portal to access all of the funding instruments. So with the exception of our international bilaterals and multilaterals and the travel grants, the calls for proposal open once a year. They open around the middle of February and they close around early May of each year. And if you miss that opportunity, then you have to wait for the new round. So there's only one open period, and you need to watch out for things like institutional closing dates, because if you get that to your research office late, then you could be disqualified as well. So yeah, so you can identify international initiatives and lobby. You can lobby as a group or as an institution. Speak to the people at the NRF, a little bit above my pay grade, but get into conversations about why you think your particular science is important. You also need to be aware of the context. So you need to know what other kinds of national initiatives are going on in a particular area. So looking at the HSRC, for instance, very active in early childhood development. There's a COE, I think it's at WITS in human development. So you really do have to make sure that you're aware of your environment, so that if you do lobby either with government or with the NRF or with your institution, that you are aware of the other activities that are being supported in a particular area. And that is my presentation, short and sweet, but that's essentially what you have to do. If you take anything away from me, the NRF website is not a great website. People are trying to sort it out, but the NRF submission system is your portal. So if you're not registered on the NRF submission system, go and get yourself registered onto the NRF submission system, and all of the research calls open at the same time and they close at the same time, with the exception of a couple of them. So it definitely would be worth your while to keep an eye out for what is available every year. So not every call is open every year. Some are only open every 3 years, some only every 5 years. So you could do well to stay in touch with your research office, and also then to every now and then just go and have a little look, see what's on the NRF submission system. We also advertise other funding opportunities there, so international funding opportunities, or calls that the NRF is involved with, because sometimes the bilaterals or the multilaterals are handled at a different funding agency. So then it wouldn't be an NRF call. Then you would have to, go to the ESRC's website and apply there. But it would be advertised on our NRF submissions and on the website as well. So yeah, so if nothing else, look at those closing dates, opening and closing dates. It takes a lot of time to write a good proposal, so you mustn't leave it too late, because the system gets bombarded and then crashes, and then you have to redo it. Make sure your CVs are up to date, especially things like your publications and your students, and then look very closely at the framework documents, which will give you a really good indication of what a good proposal in a particular instrument would require. So all the information will be there on the NRF submission system when the calls open, and then you would have a look and see what would fit your your particular area of interest. So these are a lot of those core opportunities that I showed you are not discipline specific. So it's not you have to be working in astronomy or you have to be working in a different area. But the contract ones are very specific. Most of the contract ones look at our national geographic advantage areas. So it's oceans and marine, Antarctica, paleosciences, and global change. So those are very, very specific. Big programs, lots of money, but quite narrow in what they will actually allow, and they only run every third year because it's a 3-year thing. Okay, thank you so much. Let's see.
Thanks, Tracy. I think that was very useful. A question that pops into my head almost immediately is, are there any plans on behalf of the NRF to do anything that's specific to ECD?
Not that I'm aware of. No, there's nothing that I'm aware of.
So would that be something worth lobbying for, to actually charge the NRF and say, look, this is such an important area. What are you doing to service it in terms of research and financing research?
Absolutely. And would that then be a conversation about a research chair, for instance? I looked through, I think there are 2 research chairs only, and I think we've got about 148 research chairs. So when you look at health, for instance, 50 of those 148 are in health. But we also have the Medical Research Council. Why is the investment so focused on health when we actually have a research council for that? So yeah, I mean, those are the kinds of arguments that you make, and I would make that argument as at a fairly senior level. So you go in at the deputy CEO, or even the CEO's office. I mean, that's the way to go, because then he will farm it out to somebody. It doesn't help you talking to me, because or even to one of my directors, because it doesn't get handled at that level. It gets handled at quite a high level. So it would need to be a national thing, so participation of everybody. It would need to be tick all the boxes for transformation and those kinds of things. And you would also then need to be able to differentiate what you are doing, or what you plan to do, or what you think should be done from other people that are doing similar research at, for instance, the HSRC, where they do, how is this different? So that would be my recommendation. Yeah. What you can also do at a project level, not a program level, but at a project level, is you can go in for any of the competitive programs. They open every year. So if you've got a valid NRF rating, then you go for rated research. If you don't, then you go for unrated research. And there are about, I think there are 13 different panels that sit. And it's everything from astronomy to zoology. It's the whole works. So if you're coming in from a social science perspective, possibly, it's that rather than health. It's more the social, right?
Well, the difficulty, Tracy, with ECD is that it covers multiple disciplines. You could come in from the health perspective, you can come in from the education perspective, you can come in from the social science perspective. That is the thing with ECD, is it is spread somewhat thinly in a way across multiple disciplines. And so, but in a way, maybe that's to our advantage, because perhaps it opens more doors to come in for support.
Sure. I mean, another way that you can succeed at the NRF is if you sit in on a review panel.
Okay.
So our reviews are over now. So May, we usually start in about July. August is panel season. We very successfully had 2 years of panels online now, and it really works nicely. And the conversation is robust, and It's always such an eye-opener for someone from outside of the NRF to actually see the rigor that is required to succeed because of the financial constraints. There's always way more good applications than there is funding. So it's very, very competitive. Very competitive.
You can definitely approach the SARISI committee to assist with those sort of reviews. We would be most interested in doing that. Thanks, Tracy.
Okay.
I see my deputy Nasima had her hand up. Sorry, Nasima, I know you had to wait a little bit. Nasima?
No, that's fine. I just interested to know in terms of the research chairs, Tracy, how many are there for early childhood education currently? Not sure if you touched on that.
There are 2.
Okay, and tell me, the research chairs, are they necessarily based one per institution?
No, some institutions have got lots of research chairs. We've got, I think, 148 research chairs. So we do try to put a research chair at like they aren't all at UCT and they aren't all at VIT. So we do try to spread the institutional representation in those research chairs. So but surprisingly, and I went through the list to have a look, and there are only 2. There are only 2. There's a Dr. Pillay at KZN, and I forget there was a lady. I forget there was another one, but it wasn't. I don't think the same kind of thing that you. So it's more human development. So it starts with early childhood all the way up to adulthood and beyond. So even though it a little bit touches on early childhood development, that's not what the research chair is for specifically. So that wouldn't be a terrible idea. I mean, you need critical mass at an institution. Why don't you have any research chairs? It's such an important area, and it's a good funding modality because it's for 5 years. You get different tiers. You get a tier 1 and a tier 2. I don't deal with the research chair, so I would be speaking under correction, but the difference between the 2 depends on how strong the research chair director is, and at what level is it, is he a PhD, is it a professor, and then depending on which tier you go into, it makes a difference in the funding. But you get that. You don't have to reapply. You get it for 5 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And Tracy, those chairs presumably are only open to the government-run universities, not private. Yeah.
No. But that doesn't mean that you can't partner with a private university. That wouldn't mean that you can't partner with them. They just can't benefit directly financially.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there are government what are they called? Ministerial guidelines. So it's only our public universities, and then some of the museums and the science councils, and then here and there, like weather service, we can help weather service, and we can help government departments that have research offices, like environmental affairs, that kind of a thing. So yeah, very limited to no NGOs and no private
and no TVETs. Presumably no TVETs either. That's actually quite problematic because, if you consider the huge role that TVETs and the NGO sector play in ECD, in a way it seems terribly short-sighted to shut the door on that aspect.
Well, I'm not saying that the door would be shut on that aspect. I'm just saying that if you partner with them, the money would have to go to you. So that doesn't mean that you can't get them involved and pay for services or whatever, but the money would go to the public university. Yeah.
Yes. So as SARISI itself, as a research association, if we wanted to apply, say, for funding, we can do that as SARISI because we've got government universities aligned with us. Our committee members consist of government universities, or is this yeah, I'm just trying to sort of get it clear in my head how
Okay.
it benefits Sarisi.
Okay, what you would do is perhaps put in a proposal on their behalf, but you would still then be the grant holder. It could be something that you, as an association, decide you want this big program and you want it to, you need to be mindful of the budgets. The budgets are always in the funding instruments. If it's got a 10 million rand budget, then don't ask for 5 million rand, because they won't only fund one.
Yeah.
So you can do that. In fact, a lot of people do it for community engagement. So he said then he was, I don't know, their chairperson or whatever the senior person is, and he put the application in on behalf of, but the grant went to him at his university.
Okay, so it wouldn't go into Sarisi's coffers. It would have to go
to the university
of a particular committee member.
Yeah.
Okay. No, thanks for that clarity. Right. Tracy, just stop screen sharing for a minute. I want to just see if there are any other hands up. Anybody else wanting to ask you something? Thanks.
Is it down now?
It's down. Thank
Sorry,
you.
guys.
No, it's fine. I'm sure they would have piped up if they were desperate. Colleagues, anything else for Tracy at this point? Anybody else wanting to either comment on what Tracy shared or what the strategy she's suggested? I think it is very interesting, the fact that you're sharing that there are only these two sort of ECD chairs in existence, and nothing better than that, considering how many government-run universities we do have.
Yeah.
And, how I know from the Peace Program and having been part of that, how very interactive those universities have been in driving that work. In a way, it sort of saddens me, because it's affirming how little value is really still placed on ECD, and that really is something we have to change. And it's been a thread, almost like a golden thread, throughout today's discussions, where there just isn't enough advocacy, there isn't enough appreciation of the work that's done in the sector. And, we really have to change that. So that's partly why we're having this the stakeholders meeting, to sort of start looking at how do we change it? What can we do with a particular emphasis on research?
So then that would be part of your argument that you would make to the CEO, is by consolidating into a research chair where you have this concentration of stakeholders.
Yes.
Then part of the role of a chair is to advocacy, is to obviously publish, is to inform the public, is to create awareness around what they're doing, all of those kinds of things. So it brings you together, not just for the research. It's a great hub for students. And if you're getting interest in it and you're struggling because the students can't, those are the very emotive arguments that you could make to say, look, this is really important. The only other thing that we have is X, Y, and Z, and that doesn't look at the same thing, or however you would want to phrase that. It's not just the NRF. The NRF is not the only it's not the only place that you can go to for funding. You can go to DHET, you can go to, Department of Health, there are other places as well. And if you make enough noise, someone's going to
step up. Yeah, to their credit, DHET has actually supported Sarisi a fair bit over the years, and they support our journal, the South African Journal for Childhood Education. So they actually have stepped up quite a bit over the years to support our work, and we're very appreciative of that. I am aware of the private sector, that can support some of that, and reaching out to them. One has to, I suppose, look at all the different avenues. the research list is enormous, and we started with a pretty enormous list, and I think after today's discussions, it's probably doubled. So we definitely have to bring the money in if we want to really get that research to happen. Yeah, Jonathan Jansen was talking about, what did he call it, us having rather small imaginations. I think if some of our egos are feeling a little battered and bruised.
He does call a spade a spade. He's very entertaining, but he's also very direct. I enjoy him terribly.
Yeah. I mean, we are also aware within our committee and within SARISI of some wonderful research that is happening, but it's not getting out there enough. And I think that's also where we want to see some change in what SARISI does.
Yeah.
But as you say, one's got to make a lot of noise and get other funders on board to really.
But also, I mean, look at things like writing thought pieces in the conversation, you know, not being critical of government, but just saying, you know, it's really interesting that this is so important and you know, X, Y, and Z, and you can name and shame. You can say, you know, we don't have this at the NRF, or, you know, our national funder doesn't, you know. So, I mean, these are all things that you can do without, it's kind of a carrot rather than a stick. If you know what I mean, it's rather that to start a conversation going, but definitely, I mean, put in your applications for competitive support, for rated or unrated, and put it in under the social sciences, even though it's a mix, because we don't get a lot of applications in
that area.
Yeah,
right.
So the success rate for that is a lot higher. It gets a portion of the budget, but our social science research is very rarely expensive like biotech, you know, so that way we can, the success rate for social sciences in that call is significantly higher than the success rate overall. Yeah.
Yes.
But they are very competitive. It's very competitive.
And Tracy, when is a good time to go and look at all of those things? Because as you were saying, it takes time to put together the proposal, but it also would take time to look at what's on the website and what might align to our work. I don't want to go and say tomorrow, and that's old news. You know, it's not stuff I can apply for. When would be, from your perspective, a good time to go look and start?
All our documents need to be loaded by the end of the year.
Right.
Sorry, my phone is ringing. It's too far away to switch it off. I'm sorry. So I think from the beginning of the year.
So January.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are on a holiday, so maybe mid-Jan or, you know, whenever, but just pop into the website, make sure. But if you aren't registered on that website, then you need to do that now. Get that done. Get that done, because it's tedious. You've got to get your CV updated. It's all very tedious. So, but once it's done, then you just update however often, and be very, very careful with your publications and your students. It's an important part of the adjudication process. Yeah.
Now, in our case, if we're registering as SARISI, I mean, I'm not registering just as me. I'm registering as SARISI. That registration presumably involves all of the committee members' CVs, etc.
You can't do it like that. It's individuals. Okay. Yeah, it's individuals. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So we'd have to
what you would do is you would put on your application that this is your co-investigators or your principal investigators, and then list them and their expertise, and be quite specific in your application what each person is actually going to be doing. You can't have just a long wish list of people, because you know, it makes it look nice and bulky. You've got to detail what they are what they're actually going to be doing. Same with your students. Yeah, you can't just say I want 3 PhD students. You have to give not at the level of thesis title, but one PhD is going to be on work package 1 and one PhD will be on work package 2. You know, that kind of level of detail. Yeah.
Right. So what you're saying here is that we would need to go back to the committee and choose a member of the committee that's going to represent the project and apply on the basis of their institution, with the rest of us, as you say, as co-conspirators, perhaps I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Try and secure the funds that way. Okay.
Yeah, that would be the way to go. Be careful. Whoever puts the application in needs to either be very strong in their own right, or they need to have a very strong team. And it must be very clear that all the expertise that you need for something like this is going to come from the team. And you're not going to be able to see that unless you embed them into your proposal in a way that's easy for someone who's reading it to see who's going to do what.
Right.
Yeah. So if you don't have a statistician, then you know, then it's important. And it's stats heavy, then it's quite important that you have one. So yeah. Thanks.
Okay. No, wonderful, Tracy. You've given us a lot of food for thought and some very useful tips. I will definitely get back in touch with you, especially regarding approaching the CEO. And
don't tell him I told you. Don't tell him I told you.
No, you can just slip us a piece of paper with his details. We won't tell him where we got it from. Thank you so much, Tracy. I really appreciate it. We've got
my email is there. So if anybody has any questions or you want to get hold of me, please just drop me an email.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tracy. We've got our last wrap-up session. You're most welcome to join us if you're available.
It's quarterly reporting. I can't.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate your time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. The rest of the delegates, I'll see you on the next link. It's our last session, and it's probably the most important because it's where we wrap up our discussion and pull together our thoughts. So please do join us for the last bit.